All right, it's 3 minutes past 4, and we are just about to start. We are now streaming live on YouTube, and hello to everybody who's watching us from there. This is the postgraduate seminar series in the School of Communication Studies at Northwest University. Today we are having presentations by Ms. Ndakona Bashingi and Dr. Mmutle. We're just waiting for a few people to connect. It seems today people are struggling, but let's just give them some time. And in the meantime, I'll play you that nice background music and we will start. And Ndakona, how are you?
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, afternoon. Thank you. Nice for joining us. And nice to have you here, and thank you for this.
All right, no problem.
Let's give our students some time to connect. Dr. Mmutle, you wanted to say something? Okay. All right, Ndakona, do you prefer to be navigating your slides, controlling them yourself, or you want us to do the honors for you? It's a matter of personal preference.
I can share from my side.
Okay, no, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. Just give them some time to connect, and then we hope we'll be having a nice session again today. So I'll be playing you that nice music, everybody, while we wait for students to connect. All right. Righty. Righty, it's now 10 minutes past 4. I propose that we move, but today we are moving on a very, very, very high note. I don't know if I'm permitted to do so, but colleagues, please join me in congratulating one of our own, Chilombo Banda, who just received her PhD, I suspect yesterday. Please correct me, Chichi, if this is appropriate.
It is appropriate, and it is finalized between Wednesday and Thursday.
Congratulations, Dr. Banda. Welcome to the club.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
It's quite encouraging. This is wonderful. Colleagues, oh, there are a stream of congratulatory messages coming. Yes. This is what we are about. Let us take some time to give room to Ndakona Bashingi. Today, we are proceeding with our postgraduate seminar series. The purpose of these sessions, as we have been saying, is not that we want to claim expertise on these subjects, the issues we're discussing. It's just that we're sharing our experiences in how to navigate this postgraduate terrain. And we are helping one another, helping our students, sharing our experiences so that maybe they try to avert or circumvent some challenges we have come across that they too might be facing. We are quite honored and thankful to be having this group of colleagues, academics, advisors, young academics who are joining us and saying, hey, I'm ready to share my personal experience. And for this, we are eternally grateful. Colleagues, allow me to present to you, as I've been doing throughout these sessions, one of our own, Ndakona Bashingi. I will just read you a profile, excuse me, momentarily. Ms. Ndakona Bashingi is a DENG civil engineering candidate and a part-time lecturer at the Central University of Technology in the Free State. Her research is on sustainable transportation, focusing on public transportation, travel patterns, travel behavior, and technology. She holds a Master of Engineering in Civil Engineering and has published and presented research outputs both nationally and internationally, and has also successfully co-supervised a master's degree student to completion, and she's currently co-supervising one. She is lecturing, her lecturing experience includes in transport planning, transportation and highway engineering, urban and regional planning, and quantitative techniques and optimization. The reason why we have her presentation today is so that she can and share with us her experiences with quantitative research, how to develop questionnaires, how to analyze some quantitative data using some software, Excel or SPSS. And she will be talking to us briefly also about regression analysis. Ms. Ndakona Bashingi, welcome, and the platform is yours. Hello, are you still there, Ndakona? Just to unmute your mic.
Okay.
Colleagues. Yes, Ndakona?
Yes,
yes, your mic is fine. You can take over then. Thank you. We seem to be having a bit of a struggle.
hello.
Yes, Ndakona?
Oh, hi, good afternoon, everybody.
You may take over. Thank you.
Oh, yes. My presentation today is going to be on a little bit of quantitative data, I'm not an expert, but just the low things that I know about quantitative data analysis from my experience, right? Basically, quantitative data means data that can be quantified, that has to do with numbers. This is quantifiable information that can be used for math calculations, statistics, etc. Right? These information can be made based on maths, can be derived from mathematical equations, statistical equations, etc. This is often used to answer questions such as what, how. It's basically how to gauge. It's used to gauge our data, right? Yes. At first, what we have is a set of data, depending where we get this data. We have our raw data, which is often like in its original format before you can do anything to it, before you can process it. This is the data you get from your questionnaires or from any other source of secondary data, right? We use this data to describe our statistics or to infer, right? The descriptive statistics being statistics which are concerned with collecting, describing, and summarizing a set of data so as to derive any meaningful information from that, from the data, right? Then we have, my screen is not, okay, we have inductive statistics, which deal with methods and techniques used for the analysis of a set or a subset of data, leading to predictions or inferences about the entire population which is under study, right? Descriptive statistics are, okay, they basically describe the relationship between any set of variables, right? These are
Are you still there in the corner? Are you still there? Ms. Bashingi? Colleagues, may we beg your indulgence? It would seem Ms. Bashingi is battling with her connectivity. I apologize for this. Let us see if we don't reach her via cell phone, and we'll be with you shortly. We have just lost connection within the corner, perhaps because we have a panel here before us. Because some of the colleagues who are familiar with quantitative data analysis, what could be some of, or in your experience, some of the challenges that one could come up with or experience when they are dealing with quantitative data collection and data analysis? What could be the lessons that one should draw from? or learn or gain? Maybe you have experienced it dealing with quantitative data, colleagues. Anybody?
Well, my study was mixed method, survey and focus group, but with the survey part, one of my challenges was the participant, not all the participants submitting the questionnaires, so it contributed to a sampling error most of the time. So you set a sample, a complete sample, but not everybody, you can't, most of the time you won't reach that sample because of participants not actually not completing.
But then now, if then it gives you that sampling error, what then would be a remedy for you? Because you had an objective or a research question which was supposed to be answered through this technique, then what do? You leave it, you abandon it, or you report it as one of the limitations?
Yeah, for me, I reported it as one of my limitations in my in my final chapter, that despite having a rich data from my data collection, this is the reality that I had, that not everybody could fill in the survey questionnaire.
Okay. Tolu, any experience? Or Tsietsi? Any experience? Anybody with quantitative data collection analysis? Thank you, Dr. Mbenga, with that 2 cents with contribution. Maybe let's just have an informal conversation, since well, our colleague has been battling with connectivity. I couldn't reach her privately, but I do hope she will connect soon. Anyway, the platform, let's open the platform for us to just have engagement. We are talking quantitative data collection and analysis. Yes. Tolu is saying in the chat, one can't hear the voices. Oh, let me see what Tolu is saying in the chat. One can't hear the voices, feelings, and experiences behind the figures. Oh, okay. Maybe this is a disadvantage, as it were. The lack of richness in terms of rigor. You are unable to get, the people's experiences, the people's voices. Yes. Ndakona, is that you?
Yes, I'm having problems here. Hopefully I don't cut off, because I'm using my phone to hotspot.
I understand.
My internet just went off, so I don't know.
I understand, and thank you for trying to connect again. We were just having a brief conversation around the challenges that one would experience in terms of quantitative data collection and analysis. But you can proceed with your presentation, and we hope you won't struggle again. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, moving on from what I was saying about the limitations of the descriptive statistics, is just that they allow you to make any summations about people or objects that you are actually measured. You cannot use the data you have collected to generalize to other people. Let's say you are collecting data on a city, right? You get the certain statistics in a city. You did not use the whole population as your sample. You just used a certain percentage of that entire population. So you cannot generalize and say, because this sample, this and this happens, this is going to happen to everybody in this city, right? This is one of the limitations of that. Then we have inferential statistics. These are concerned with analyzing data and then interpreting the results by attempting to go beyond that data, right? The main way to do that is collecting data from a sample and using the sample result to infer conclusions about the population. Like you find out a certain percentage of the population likes something, then you can infer saying, okay, because my data shows that 90% of the sample likes oranges, which means majority of the population might like oranges because they are easily available in the area, they are cheap or something like that. This is where we infer our results, basically. Its limitations are that you are providing data about a population that you have not fully measured. So you cannot be completely sure that this is true. You cannot be sure that, okay, so this person who also likes oranges, likes them because they are cheap or something like that. You cannot do that. Some, but not all inferential tests require the user to make educated guesses. This can be based on theory to run any other inferential tests, right? Some of the quantitative methods used in analyzing our data, we have some time series analysis, correlation and regression, estimation and significance testing, decision-making under conditions of risk and uncertainty, as well as in maybe more business-like subjects, causes break-even analysis, right? So we use nominal and ordinal scale. Nominal scale basically means when you're using your numbers to identify members of a group or a category. These are just straightforward numbers. Then the ordinal one is where the scale uses numbers to rank responses according to a criteria, right? They have no units. You can, an example I can give is where you have something as a age groups, then you assign them numbers, and that's where we call these an ordinal scale. Where interval scale, this is the same as distance between values. You use a scale with different values. Then we have our ratio scale, which is a constant unit of measurement, and where an absolute 0 point. These are scales used to, that the measurement of something is 2 centimeters and does that. So this is a scale used to measure values, lengths, weights, and other characteristics, where they are well-defined units of measurement and where there is a given 0. Okay, then we have what we call variables and data. Variable basically means whatever you are measuring. If you're measuring age, you're measuring distance, you're measuring weight, those are your variable, right? This is any characteristic on which observations can be made. So like I was saying, you're observing people's weight, age, you are observing distance, you are observing likeliness of something. These are what we call our variables. We have dependent and independent variable. Independent, basically, these are our predictor variables, right? Can be manipulated in an experiment in order to observe its effect on a dependent variable, which is the outcome variable. We may have in an instance where you have to measure the effect of traveling long distances on maybe, let's say, distance and money. For example, if you are on a transportation stuff, research, you trying to measure the impact of distance on fares, for example. If you're going to say how much, if a person travels a distance of 5 kilometers per day and pays $20, for example, then those kilometers, right? Those kilometers are what we use as our independent variable in the case. Then the outcome, which is the money, if you're going to increase maybe the distance and say for 10 kilometers, the person will have to pay a certain amount, right? So these are our dependent. The money paid depends on the distance traveled in this case. Right. Then the details I've been talking about up to now, these are about quantitative, but here's a little background on quantitative versus our qualitative, right? Quantitative, these are numbers, we observe numbers, whereas the qualitative deals with non-numeric values, non-numeric observations. I mean, this is your color, things that you cannot put a number to. These are what we call our qualitative variables, right? Okay, then we have continuous variables. Remember we have our nominal and ordinal variables. We have continuous variable. These may take value between two stated limits, right? Then we have discrete variables. These are variables which can only take certain values occurring at intervals between stated limits. You have a set limit between this number and this number. This also applies to things such as money. You may have a question in your questionnaire, which is you asking people about their income, and somebody doesn't want to say, okay, I make 5,000 per month, right? Then you may provide a range between income between 0 to 2,000, between 2,000 to 5,000, then somebody will be able to take that the value, right? You know that this person earns between 2,000 and 5,000 rand, but you do not know the exact value of their exact income to the T, right? Okay. The data we often use in qualitative studies, this can be primary data or secondary data. Primary, this is the data that you source out yourself. This is the data that you collect for your research. Your questionnaire, all those responses you get from questionnaires, from interviews, from you doing a traffic count or observing something somewhere. These are our primary data, whereas the secondary data is data that already exists, that can be statistics from your office somewhere, with the data that has been already collected, that's already there. You just have to go to their records, ask for the records, and then that's your secondary data. Okay. We have cross-section data. This is collected from a sample of units for a single time period. Right. Then time series, this is collected from one person, one single unit over a period of time. Let's say you measuring somebody's, I don't know whether using weight would be appropriate. Yes, saying this person in January, this person weight was 50 kg. After 30 days, the weight was 52 kg. After another 30 days, the weight was 51 kg. This is what we call time series data. Right. Now, as we're dealing with data analysis, we're going to be using mostly our own primary data, how to collect your data and analyze your data, right? Our primary data can be collected via interviews, questionnaires that you give people to complete on their own, or through personal observation. This is where you have to, maybe an example such as the traffic count. This is what we call personal observation, and just counting the vehicles, right? A background on interviews and their advantages is that data can be collected quickly, right? And at much affordable or cheaper rates, right? Also, it's versatile because it gives the interviewer a chance, right, to be able to talk to the respondents. This is our interviewees, right? And also, this can usually create space or opportunity for high response rate if you go on the interview, approaching people individually, right? Then another advantage is that this method of collecting data with a well-designed questionnaire it is possible to ask a large number of short questions in one interview, right? Which means that the costs are reduced. We're going back to the affordability, it means it's much more cheaper to use interviews. Then you have questionnaires. Questionnaires, there are different types of questionnaires you can use. You can just write your questionnaire, print it out as a hard copy, give people to complete the questionnaire, right? Also, now we have online platforms provide for our questionnaires. I think my slides here just got mixed up. This slide was supposed to come after, before the one I just presented on questionnaires, but yes, this just is the disadvantages of having to use interviews because difficult, you can lose control. Also, you can make mistake when selecting your interviewers, and then you can get inadequate responses. Or also, interviews highlight the need to train interviewers correctly, right? It is important to ensure that all interviewers ask questions in a similar way. In interviews, this way, matters of bias and some of these unethical things, ethics things come into play if maybe you are using a group of different people to carry out the interviews instead of one person doing the research uniformly. Right? Okay, now we're supposed to be talking about questionnaires, which we're dealing here with self-completion questionnaire, where you create your questionnaire and you send out to people to complete. This can be in hard copies. You can email or design a questionnaire and reflect how you want to use that questionnaire. Now we have, besides hard copies, you can use platforms such as your Google Forms, your Question Pro, and your SurveyMonkey. You can design your questionnaire on Google Forms, send to people, they can send them the link, they respond, and you can thereafter download your data, send it to Excel, and start analyzing it. Same applies to Question Pro and SurveyMonkey. These have made things much more easier in terms of data collection, where you don't have to go around, doing giving people questionnaires, hard copies of questionnaires, right? What to observe when designing a questionnaire. First of all, you need to make it short because people can get impatient with long questionnaires. Make it short, just makes it easier for you to get results as fast as possible, right? And you can get the right, correct results. Then you have to explain the purpose of your research to encourage people to answer. If you start a questionnaire just with questions and give somebody a paper with questions, first thing they see is question 1, and they do not know what they're being asked. Basically, their chances of accurately responding are limited, right? You have to explain, my name is so-and-so, I'm doing this research. This will help the person decide on whether they wanna answer or not, and also will save you a little bit of wasted time, right? Questions should be short and simple, right? If possible, only no, and maybe where you have to. Hello, sorry.
Yes, you're fine. You're fine. We lost you momentarily there, but you can proceed.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, I see an SMS on my phone warning about my airtime balance. Would like to, yeah, I think it's a connectivity issue. Okay, I'll try top up and see what happens.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see that.
In the corner is trying to deal with her connectivity issue. But in the meantime, while she's doing so, may I request that we have a conversation? Dakona, you will stop us when you are back?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes, I was going to stop at the end before moving on to showing how Excel and everything works. This was just the theoretical background.
All right.
Yes. Yes. Like I was saying, the questions should be short, right? The respondent should be able to answer the question with only one interpretation of the question, and leading questions should be avoided. When you asking questions and you leading the respondent in ways to like what you feel the answers should be, that should be avoided. Just you interpret the question to them and let them complete the question on their own, right? Where possible, use alternative answer system, where if the person cannot choose another answer, there should be an alternative. If no, then give reasons that gives you space to get more data and more information for your interpretation, your analysis of the data at the end, right? The question should be asked in a logical sequence, so that like the question that comes first should seamlessly lead to the next question, and not jumping from topic or theme to the other, right? They should be like in sequence. So, and the respondent should be assured that the answers will be treated confidentially and not be used to his or her detriment. So this also applies, the second point I made, that the purpose of the survey should be made clear to the respondent, right? So the confidentiality, that way it also comes, you need to state that, okay, your responses here will be made confidential. They're only going to be used for research purposes, and they cannot be used in any way against you or cannot be distributed to other people without your consent. So these are some of the things you need to consider when designing your questioning. Yeah, I think as Dr. Molale said about pausing, I think we can pause now before moving on for a conversation.
Okay, there are some questions in the corner in the chat. There was a point where you're talking about giving your respondents a range to choose from, so that they don't give a specific answer. Doesn't that pose a risk or a potential for respondents to provide incorrect answers? Remember, you made the example about asking people about how much they earn. Someone, if maybe their salary is between 0 and 5,000 rand, but they are embarrassed to say so, wouldn't they choose higher ranges? And doesn't this then lead to you having incorrect findings? That's the first one. The second one is on the issue of interviews. Does one always go with close-ended questions for effective statistical analysis? I'm not sure if you've got that one.
Question 2, I did not get question 2.
Does one always go with close-ended questions if they want to have an effective statistical analysis? Should you always use the close-ended questions, not open-ended? Or that's the question. And then the same person, Dr. Mmutle, by the way, is the one who's asking that question, and then he makes a follow-up. He says, I would imagine that open-ended questions wouldn't be statistically quantifiable. What do you think about this?
Okay, I think, can you start with the last one? I think he or she, they have a point on the question, the interview questions and open-ended questions versus close-ended. Speaking from a, okay, I want things to be precise point of view, it will be like, okay, close-ended, that would make more, give more accurate statistics, right? But then open-ended gives room for a better analysis and interpretation. Like, I know we talk about statistics and everything. We cannot present a graph without explaining the graph in most cases. And I think open-ended question questions, once you make themes, you get, if you have open-ended questions, you can make themes for your responses, right? You might find out most of the themes are related, and having reading more into the respondent's answer or response would give you more detail why the question was answered in a certain way. If you give a question yes or no question, then you know that yes, but why is this person agreeing with me, or why is this person disagreeing with this? So open-ended questions gives us scope for interpretation of results, gives us more insight, a bit of theory, even though we're talking about quantities here. I think a bit of theory to explain the results is always good. I do not have all the answers as to how, the current literature and everything on how interviews are open-ended and everything. So I cannot
the issue around suitability between
on that.
open-ended and closed-ended. Yeah, it is quite a challenge, and I thank you for at least sharing your own experience in this respect.
Yes, I think open-ended helps a bit with interpretation and understanding, deeper understanding, but then closed-ended helps with the statistical part. Okay, I know that most people disagree with this, and that's it. Why do they disagree? We don't know. Yes.
Yeah. All right.
The first question was on. Oh, I forgot the first question.
In fact, that question was on the issue around giving the respondents range. Doesn't it pose the potential for respondents to give incorrect answers?
Yes. Yes, I think it does. Because there are like social aspects we shouldn't forget about when it comes for questions like money related. There are social, I don't know whether to call them as social factors, where somebody feel like, I don't want to tell people that I earn $500, for example. So a range of this and this will be better. If I choose 1,000, a range between 1,000 and 2,000, maybe that will make me feel better in a way, but still, I think we still need the people to respond. We need to give response. Questions like that will kind of limit them. Somebody will say, oh, now why do you need to know how much I make exactly? Especially if it's I've noticed making questionnaires with people who, I've experienced this with people who earn low and people who earn high salaries. So I don't know how to quite relate those two. Some will be embarrassed, some will not want to say, okay, I make 50,000 a month. Some will say, I don't want to say that I make 2,000 a month. So I don't quite understand that as well, and how best to deal with it to avoid misrepresentation, inaccurate data. So
understood, and I like your honesty. I like your honesty, and you won't push us on our end. Thank you so much. But at least you are giving an idea to say that there are weaknesses when we look at these strategies for collecting data. Perhaps if one is aware of the weaknesses, then as a student you might want to decide to say, you know what, instead of using this kind of technique or data collection tool, I will use this one. Maybe the weaknesses in this one are less than the ones in this other data collection tool, and this would be easier for me, and I think I can do it. Then you go ahead. I think, you are giving frank, honest responses.
Yes,
and thank you so much.
I'm also learning because I'm in the process, so I'm also
of course.
come up with as I go.
Yeah, of course, understood. You may proceed then.
Okay. Some advantages of these questionnaires: they are cheap. Unless you're doing where you have to go house to house, go to places and print lots of questionnaires. But normally they are quite cheap if you're using online platforms. If you do not have to subscribe to a certain platform for a fee, you can use they can cost you close to nothing. If you get on Google, create your form, create your questionnaire on Google, send out links via email, that is cheaper, right? This is quite cheaper. Then this is when people still mailing your questionnaire to some people. This mailing questionnaires to different addresses. These were used mostly in transportation. I've come across them in transportation way, because you're studying household, living in different areas, different area codes, you're mailing questionnaires to these addresses. So the direct cost here was mainly associated with having to post your questionnaires to people, or your survey tools to people, right? Then questionnaires can be distributed to a wider range of respondents at a cheaper rate, especially online, right? Then they allow a large number of respondents to respond, and giving also allows time. If you're filling out a questionnaire on your own at your own time, as a respondent, this gives you more time to complete the questionnaire, right? Then also it eliminates the bias. If I was to come to you with a questionnaire and sit next to you and keep on asking questions, leading questions, etc., these we can get biased during the process, right? But then if you're on your own, completing it on your own, this is quite your own honest opinion, right? And in some cases, if the interviewer is biased or not adequately trained, they can lead to serious distortion of the results. This is where the person is being led on by the interviewer, etc., right? Then the disadvantages, this is for the inability of the planners to control the number of responses. This is if you do not send to a specific set of selected people, right? If you send out a link, let's say you create your questionnaire, send out a link on Facebook, for example, right? Then you cannot be able to control the number of people who respond to that, right? In some cases, respondents will not reply, and others will feel like they are not qualified to respond to your questionnaire, right? Okay. Now, how do we decide how much questionnaires and from whom do we want these? Do we want the responses from, right? This is through sampling.
Are you still there in the corner? The corner screen is frozen. But maybe because I know she's struggling with connectivity in her area, I was just noting when the corner was talking about the different ways, cost-effective measures of using survey questionnaires. You mail them, you send them on Facebook to a specific group, or you send them well, when you're mailing them by post, or you mail them via email. So these are the different cost-effective measures that one can take. I just wrote on the chat, taking back Dr. Banda's point of view, that not submitting to an enough set of respondents might yield a sample error. So maybe as an advice, if you are going to use questionnaires in your study, perhaps it might be advisable to sample a larger group so that you avoid having a sampling error, because the honest truth is that not all people are going to respond to your questionnaire. Not all of them will send your questionnaire back. She is disconnected. She has been speaking with me via Twitter and telling me her network problems. I note that challenge, and we are so sorry that and Dakona's presentation was cut off short. But can we have anyone with any question? Perhaps we might have a discussion. Any student wishing to ask any question? We're talking quantitative data collection, quantitative data analysis, data collection tools. Any input or questions or comment? Dr. Mmutle, can you check for us if there's something in the chat, please? Quantitative data collection, quantitative data analysis, data collection. Input or questions or comment? Dr. Mmutle, can you check for us if there's something in the chat, please?
Thank you, Dr.
Quantitative data collection, quantitative data analysis, data collection. Input or questions?
Thank you.
We seem to be having a challenge with Dr. Mutle's mic as well. Humble apologies, our humble apologies, colleagues. But let me go into the chat. I do not see any input in the chat. Doesn't anybody wish to say anything? Chichi, can you confirm to me that I'm audible, please? Or to sit there, please confirm if you can hear this.
I can hear, right?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chichi, for that confirmation. There was feedback around my side, but it is sorted out. Colleagues, let's have a conversation. Let's talk. We just have a few minutes before we welcome our next presenter. And we've heard what Nakona has said. Let's have the conversation. What do you think about quantitative data collection and analysis? Chichi, your mic is open. You want to say something?
When Dakona was talking about the advantages of the questionnaire, about posting the questionnaire, what came to my mind was that, you know, as a limitation, they can get lost in the mail if something goes wrong on the way to the respondents or on the way back from the respondents.
Yeah. Yeah, all right. Thank you for that input, Chichi. Njingane, I know that you are a radical in these sessions. I'm looking forward to hearing. Are you perhaps using quantitative data collection tools or instruments? Njingane? Or is anybody in this forum in their own studies working on quantitative data collection and analysis? Perhaps I don't need to say to anybody specifically. Dr. Mmutle, are you seeing anybody there?
Thank you, Dr. Molale. I see there's a chat from Nsingane. I'm on mixed method, but my mic has a problem. Unfortunately, he can't address. But Nsingane, you can always use the chat to say something. Then we'll be able to convey it to the rest of the attendees. Dr. Molale, I was also interested in what Dr. Banda said earlier in terms of her experience, and I'm keen to know what she simply said, that the failure to at least receive a quiet number of questionnaires, as in when you distribute them to receive the responses back, gives us what we call a sampling error. I wanted her to elucidate more further on what is a sampling error, therefore, and the implications going forward for the analysis process itself. Dr. Banda, can you please perhaps share with us what sampling error entails, particularly for some of us who are more inclined to qualitative rather than quantitative?
So sampling error is basically a statistical error. It happens when you as a researcher does not select a sample that represents, you end up, at the end of the day, your sample is not really representative of the entire sample that you set out to collect data on. And so it sort of puts a dent in your, it does not represent the results that you would have obtained from the entire population sample that you set out to do. Yeah.
If we were to qualify it, would I be correct to say that, let's say initially I intended to distribute about 500 questionnaires, and the response that I get, therefore, leads me to something around a range of 250. Would that suffice as a sampling error? Or is there a specific technique, therefore, to gauge this particular sampling error? Or should I get at least a particular number, not necessarily even 250, but let's say around a range of 100, therefore, which I think in my mind, it is not sufficient, noting the fact that the initial thought was around getting 500 questionnaires, distributing 500 questionnaires. And what I received, therefore, in turn, from this particular respondents who have completed the questionnaire, it's around a range of 100 to 250. Would that suffice as a sampling error?
There's a way to get your sampling error. There's a particular equation that you use to calculate how to get your sampling, what your sampling error would be if that was to happen.
Okay.
We call it the Yamani sampling error technique.
Okay, yes.
Yes.
Because I know for a fact, sampling errors, and I needed your indulgence on this, are not necessarily born out of nowhere. There's a particular way to at least discover that particular sampling error. Recently, I worked on something, and we were simply speaking about calculating a discriminant. And I was puzzled to say, what is a discriminant? From my qualitative experience, this was foreign a bit. I had to go and induct myself on the method and the process of calculating such. And earlier on, I had a question for Ndakona. I hope, because I see her in joining as well, I wanted to know whether can you factor analyze interviews, particularly close-ended interviews. Can you factor analyze them? And I don't know if she's able to respond to that. I don't see her anymore. Any colleague to assist in that regard, those with experience on quantitative methods or techniques? Can you factor analyze interviews the way you can do with your questionnaires? Any thoughts on that? Colleagues, you are also welcome to say anything not necessarily related to what I've said, simply to share with us some of your experiences as well. I'm also interested to hear those who have used mixed methods. So how did they go about, what is their experience with using both quali and quanti? Perhaps you can speak about the benefits, reliability versus validity. Anyone? You can also use the chat function. I see Dr. Banda says with mixed method, the benefit is validity. And I would want to agree with you simply because of you are able, these two methods that you have now mixed together, you are able to triangulate, and as much as you are able to triangulate, therefore, you are able to validate your own results. And I think that is the first point of departure. But there are more characteristics to this. There are more benefits added rather than only validity. And I wanted those with experience in this particular mixed method terrain to be able to share with us as well what are some of the highlights and benefits that can be deduced from using this combination of the two, quali and quanti. Anything else? Then if there are no inputs, Dr. Molale, I think because of time as well, we can proceed with the second session to be presented by Dr. Ponto Moyela. I would hand over to Dr. Molale to introduce Dr. Ponto Moyela. Dr. Molale, over to you, sir.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Mmutle. And thank you very much, colleagues. I added a comment in the chat to say that one weakness of qualitative data is that you're unable to generalize your findings, which is a strength when you're looking at the quantitative side. So maybe if one were to combine the two, when you pick a particular segment, a particular context, and then you are able to get a rigor that rich data. But in order to generalize your findings, perhaps you might want to use the quantitative side of your research to ask a broader population, administering a questionnaire so that you can be able to generalize inputs that you got from your qualitative side. So maybe that could be a way to try and merge the two data collection techniques in a mixed methods approach. That was my 2 cents worth, but thank you very much, Dr. Banda, Dr. Mmutle, and all colleagues for your inputs. And might I just convey our sincerest apology on behalf of Nakona Bashingi. She's been looking forward to attending these sessions. But connectivity posed to be a challenge. We are moving further on nonetheless. We have Dr. Moyela, who's going to be talking to us about, after working on your studies, after having this grueling process of learning about theory, methodology, and collecting data, doing all these things, then where to from here? Kuavadis. And might I then ask Dr. Moyela to come and share with us some ways on how to get published, some guidance on how to get our work published in peer-reviewed journals. And Dr. Moyela is with the University of Pretoria. She's a lecturer in human genetics at that University of Pretoria, and she leads the Anti-Cancer Drug Discovery Research Group, which focuses on identifying breast and cervical cancer biomarkers and targeting these with potential medicinal plants. She enjoys being part of a force and energy that comes from research and innovation. In fact, doing research, especially in the field of drug discovery against non-communicable diseases that pose a threat to the African continent, and coming up with possible treatment strategies means contributing to society as a whole. Having graduated in a Master of Science in rocket time and publishing the work in an internationally recognized good impact factor journal in 2020, this remains her biggest milestone thus far. She also is a proud recipient of the prestigious British Council Researcher Linked Scholarship, which afforded her the opportunity to conduct research at Nottingham University in the UK. So outside work, she is a mother and an identical twin sister who is a lover of early morning runs, and she is committed to lifelong learning. That's quite a mouthful, and might I say, you've got a very colorful background, Dr. Moyela. The platform is yours. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Molale, for a great introduction. So are we talking about how to get published in a scientific journal? And this is because throughout this seminar series, we've seen beautiful, wonderful presentations on how to do your research and how to, plan your methods and how to abide by the ethics. And so as a student who's, I don't know, maybe almost completing their master's or completing their PhD, you now have this beautiful body of work that you have with you, but then the question is, what are you going to do with this work? You're not just going to file it in your cabinet or just, have it sitting somewhere. It has to go out there and, speak to the masses and trigger discourse and, so that's why I felt it is important for me to talk about how to get published in a scientific journal. Although it's not very popular for postgraduate students, especially at honors and master's level, to get to start publishing, but depending on your supervisor, you can really publish from honors and master's level. In fact, my first publication was when I was at master's level. And at that time, I didn't know what goes on behind the closed doors of getting published, the whole publishing process. I didn't know what went on. My supervisor just said, you need to write your work and we need to publish it. And I wrote it. I gave it to him. I don't know what he did with it until I saw it on the internet and as I became a published researcher. So that's why I feel that it's important as a student to know what goes on during the review process, to know what's going on in order for your work to be published and be seen out there, because at the end of the day, that's the whole purpose of you doing this research. You want it to have impact. And one way for it to impact masses is when it gets published. So that's in a nutshell why I felt the need to present this work. But before I continue, I want to bother you a bit and just ask you this question. Why should science be published? According to you, the student, according to you, the early researcher, or anyone in this platform can participate. Just unmute yourself and let us know why should science be published. Anyone, really, anyone.
I'm looking in the chat. I do not see anybody's mic opening up. Colleagues, why should we publish science? Pino?
I think the process is the one that really, when you write an article, you write it and submit it for publishing, for consideration. It means that it will be looked at by peers who will check whether it meets the standards of that publication. But also for it to meet the standards of that publication, it must really be a well-written academic article that is really, really structured in most cases in the manner that is stipulated by the journal itself. So once it is the article is reviewed by your peers, it then ends up having more weight, because then it means your work has gone through because it's not easy to be published. You can submit your article to one publisher and then they will reject it maybe 15 times or so. And because also I think maybe in this presentation that the doctor is doing today, it'd be nice also to hear from her how one should deal with rejection, because I think that's one of the key, especially when you're an African scholar. It's not easy to be, because our work is always looked at with suspicion. Well, I don't want to be gossiping as if I'm on Twitter, but but the reality is that once your article is published, it means that it has gone through a rigorous review, and that it means that it's got more weight. It has been accepted by your peers, and now it's seen as a presentation of knowledge. I think that's the issue.
Yeah, all right. Virginia, you raised your hand, yes?
Yes, I think it why the article should be published. What is the point of doing all that research or that standard and not share it? It's important to share it for other researchers, maybe to, have a look at it and see how they can improve on what you've researched and your results. And also, it's good to share science articles if it's on a certain level where it is published. You've put in the work, you need to share it. We need to know what you did.
Dr. Mmutle in the chat, Dr. Muyela, he says, knowledge production is important. Publishing is simply sharing the knowledge across specific domains. This is also imperative for informing society on current developments, maybe in the literature or in the field of study. Over to you.
Thank you. I see there's another hand, Dr. Molale.
Yes, Dr. Banda, you may go ahead.
Might I also add that, publishing, it gives you a voice in your field of study. It gives you a standing and among your peers in terms of what you are doing, in terms of your expertise.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all your sentiments. And your sentiments are also echoed by these quotes here that I found online. So Gerard Peel, who is a renowned scientist, says that without publication, science is dead. And I agree with that, because then at the end of the day, why did you do this research if you're not going to publish it and, let your voice be heard, like the recent speaker has just said. And again, wisdom exists with the pen, I believe. So it is important that we publish the work that we have done. So the simple answer to this question from myself as well is that if you do not publish your work, it has no meaning in the world of science. Studies find their value only by publishing, if they reach conclusions, that is. So obviously you can't publish your work if you haven't figured out what is it that you have, what new knowledge is it that you have produced. It is only when you can conclude from your findings that you will feel the need to want to publish the work and let your voice be heard. Let people start a discourse on what you are sharing or on what knowledge you have produced. So one of the common mysteries encountered by young researchers or even postgraduate students is the subject of how to prepare a scientific article. And I think throughout this series of presentations, I think students now have an idea of how to write scientifically, how to abide by the ethics, and so forth. So in this case, another mystery that is encountered by young researchers and students is the subject of how does the publication process work? And that's the question that I'm trying to answer in this presentation. And I'm sure that most of you have gathered some answers, if not all, on the how to prepare a scientific article, like I've just said. So today I'll be answering the question, how does the publication process work? Right. So in my presentation, I'll start by talking about the process of publishing, and then I'll give you some tips on how to find the right journal for your work to be published, tips on identifying what is called predatory journals, and how peer review works. And I'll also touch on how you can promote your article once it is published, because by just being published by a journal, it doesn't really mean that everyone can see your work. So you need to work even after that acceptance message. you need to work for your article to be seen, to be read, to, you know, to be argued on. So in additional to where you draft your article, let me try to activate my laser pointer. So in a traditional publishing process, obviously you'll draft your article according to, you know, all the wonderful tips that you got from this series. You will send your work to a journal that you've identified. And at this journal, there's an editor who will either okay your manuscript or reject it right away, and we call that desk rejection. So the editor can reject your manuscript before it even goes for peer review, and you will see why as I continue with this presentation. But your manuscript can be accepted by the editor and be passed on to the review panel, and that will be the second phase of your publishing process. And here you have reviewers. It's usually 2 reviewers who will review your work. And the work will probably go from the reviewers back to the editor, and the editor is the one who will say, okay, we need to reject this work because it's not what we are looking for, or the editor can accept your work and your work becomes published. And that's the traditional publishing process. In simple terms. However, there are newer methods of publishing that are emerging lately, and in those methods you find that they're usually called the author-driven publishing processes, where the editor still conducts the editorial triage, but authors can decide what and when to publish, and the peer reviewers or the peer reviews are published together with the article. So it's not only just this traditional publishing process that exists. There's other methods that are involved lately. For example, like I said, you can have you as the author deciding who's going to be your reviewers. So you give the editor, these are the people that I think should be my reviewers, but the editor will of course have to check whether or not there's no conflict of interest before they can accept those chosen reviewers by you. But for the purpose of this presentation, I'll be talking about the traditional publishing process, because I think this process is widely used in various fields of research. So I will stick to the traditional publishing process. Now, submitting your article to an inappropriate journal will result in what is called desk rejection, like I said. And this is where the journal editors reject your manuscript without even sending it to the peer review panel. And in order to avoid this desk rejection, because it can be very frustrating, you told yourself that I've always wanted to publish in this journal, but now I'm being rejected right away. What's going on? So to avoid that and to increase your chances of making it to peer review, you need to consider the following factors when choosing a journal, and that is taking into account the journal's target audience. That's very important. So if your study is transdisciplinary, in other words, it has broad implications and therefore may interest researchers from different fields, then you might want to choose a journal that covers a wide spectrum of topics. And vice versa, if your work is more specialized, it would be wiser to select discipline-specific journals, right? It is also important to read the author guidelines. Usually they appear on the journal website, the instructions for authors. So it is also important to read those author guidelines on the website of that potential journal that you have selected to familiarize yourself with their requirements. And also the aim and scope of that journal is very important for you to identify. Because if your research, for example, is in graphic design, you should target graphic design journals. If it is in corporate communication, you should target corporate communication journals and so forth, right? So have a look at articles published by your candidate journal to get an idea of which topics the editors are interested in. Now, in your, if your main goal, for example, let's say, is to reach as many readers as possible, it is always advisable to consider candidate journals that provide an open access option. So you have either subscription or open access options of publishing. So in open access, this is where you do pay an article processing fee or article processing charge at the beginning, or once your manuscript has been accepted. But from there onwards, your article will be open to everyone online because it is going to be available online. Whereas with subscription, any person who wishes to access your article will have to pay each time they open it online. And personally, I prefer the open access option, and this is what most people are opting for nowadays, because I mean, it then goes back to the question of, so then why am I doing this research if I want to restrict people from reaching this work? So open access is the way to go lately, which I am all for. Another factor to take into account when selecting a journal for your manuscript could be the journal's impact factor. Although there is an ongoing debate on whether or not the impact factor is all that for a journal, perhaps one might ask, what is impact factor, right? And according to me, impact factor is a scholarly metric that reflects the yearly average number of citations for articles published, let's say in the last 2 or 5 years in a given journal. And the main criticism from the scientific community when it comes to impact factor has always been that impact factors or citations or citation analysis are generally affected by field-dependent factors. And those could be, for example, readership or interest in the subject area, which may invalidate comparisons, not only across disciplines, but even within different fields of research of one discipline. I'll give an example with you, the student in communication studies, and myself in life sciences. So these are completely 2 different disciplines, and it would highly be inaccurate to expect us, me and you, to publish in journals of competing impact factors. It is for this reason, therefore, I believe that other members of the scientific community are calling for not just a replacement of the impact factor within with more sophisticated metrics for science publication, but also, you know, a discussion on the social value of research assessment and, you know, its implications on scientific careers in higher education. Because I don't know in communications, but in my field, in biological sciences, people take impact factor like very seriously to an extent where it will determine your career. So if you're not publishing in high impact factor journals, your chances of getting this promotion are very much limited. And that could be unfair in some instances. So yeah, those are the other things you might want to consider. Do you think that impact factor is all that for you or not? Now, still looking at factors to consider when selecting the journal, it is also important to ask yourself questions such as, where do I read papers related to my research? Perhaps you have a set of goals for when you aim to submit that PhD, that MSc dissertation, and might therefore consider whether or not you are in a rush to publish your results. And here you might want to look up the journal's publication timeline, right? So what is their turnaround time from submission to publication? You might also want to ask yourself, is the journal reputable? And that's a very valid question to ask, because there's what is called predatory journals. And I will answer this question, or I'll talk about those in the next few slides. But these are some of the things that you need to ask yourself as you are about to put your very precious work out there. Is this journal reputable? Am I supposed to publish my work? Does my publication determine whether or not I'm graduating in my PhD, for example? Because I know with a lot of institutions, you need to have produced a publication before you can graduate as a PhD student, or before you can even submit as a PhD student. So is that a factor in your field? But yeah, other students have good supervisors who do all of this admin for them, and yours is just to worry about writing that manuscript. But if you're planning to go into the academic world, I think it's important that you be bothered by these questions, and you do ask yourself these questions, and yeah, familiarize yourself with the whole process of publication. So like I said, predatory journals, what are these? So these are highly questionable scientific journals. So they claim to be legitimate scholarly journals, whereas in fact they are not. And what are their characteristics? They are usually aggressive in chasing for submissions. They will send you endless emails to say, hey, you are the esteemed professor, even if you are a student, and that's the biggest red flag. I'm still a student, and yet you're calling me an expert in a field. Never ever buy into those. Usually, a journal will invite you to publish with them if you are established in that field. You are a professor, and you know the field very well. So, but if you are a student and a journal just creeps into your email and says, hey, you can submit here, we have a short time, turnaround time, ask yourself a lot of questions. Is this a legitimate journal? Such journals also hide information about their APCs because their main goal is to make money out of you. So they'll never come forth in terms of how much they'll be charging you in terms of article processing charges. You'll just be surprised with a huge bill towards the end of their so-called review process, which in most cases doesn't even exist. They don't have any peer review. And if there's any, it's usually not robust. And I don't know, I wonder if anyone in the audience has ever experienced an instance where they submitted their work to a predatory journal, and I'm just asking myself, if you have, what happened to your work? What happened in the end? Did you find yourself paying these exorbitant amounts of APCs? And if you did, well, is your work still available online? Because what they do is you'll pay that exorbitant amount of money, and a few days or weeks after that, your work is nowhere to be found online, or even their journal is nowhere to be found online because they got what they wanted, the APC. So we need to be careful there, especially as early researchers, as students who want to break into this competitive world of publishing. So another avoiding predatory journals tips there, like I said, if they send you an email, do not consider that as legitimate. And if you go to their website, you pick up some grammatical errors on their homepage, because I mean, this thing is not real. They often don't expose their impact factor if they do have. And you might want to ask yourself, do they have any retraction policies? And you can be able to find this on their website. If it is not there, you need to ask yourself a lot of questions, because a reputable journal will have a retraction policy where it allows you, in case you published something that's incorrect and you wish to correct it, they should have a policy on how you can, do that. Are they compliant with any ethics committee? When it comes to publishing, for example, are they compliant with the COPE? These are the things that you need to ask yourself when you are selecting that candidate journal to publish that beautiful masterpiece that you've just produced in the lab. Another thing you need to ask yourself, are they indexed? Usually the most common index search tools are your Scopus and your Web of Science. I know that these are interdisciplinary, but I'm sure there are indices that are specific to the communications field of research. I might not be aware, but I chose these ones because they're cross-cutting. And if a journal is indexed, it'll have an ISN number, it'll have DOIs, it'll have an editorial board with their names on the website. And sometimes you'll find that these names are there, but they're not legit, or they are legit, but they didn't even double check with the owners of those names. They didn't even get permission. So these are the things you need to ask yourself as you're selecting that, potential journal. An index journal, for example, will also clearly state their peer review policy. They'll mention what their timeline is, their turnaround time for you to get feedback. Usually in my field, it takes about minimum 2 to 3 months to get your feedback from the review panel. I don't know in this field, but those things should be, explicit on their webpage. And if they are not, you need to ask yourself questions there. Another way to check whether a journal is legit, there's this website, Think, Check, Submit. So if you get a journal name and you're not sure about it, even with conferences, guys, I know we're talking about articles, articles here, but even with conferences, there are predatory conferences where you will send your abstract only to find and pay for the registration, only to find that you submitted your work to a predatory conference or a predatory journal. So the best way to check sometimes is to visit this website and just type in the name of that conference or that journal. And you should be, the page will tell you who indexed this particular journal. Is it Web of Science? Is it Scopus? And in that way, you can have some confidence that this is a legit journal. You can also read articles. There's a lot of articles online that try to explain what are predatory journals and how can you differentiate them from legit journals. So we are now going to talk about the review process. So during the review process, your submitted manuscript is screened by professionals in your field, right? So the peer review system exists to validate academic work. It helps to improve the quality of published research, and it increases networking possibilities within research communities. So despite criticism, there's a lot of people who criticize the peer review and don't like the peer review. But despite all that, the peer review is still the only widely accepted method for research validation. And I personally also think that peer review is a very important part in my work being published. I wouldn't be confident with publishing my work without it being peer reviewed by experts in the field, And ultimately, the main purpose of the peer review is to maintain the integrity of science, in general, by filtering out invalid or poor quality manuscripts. And I think that's why it is so important that we have our work peer reviewed. But yeah, you'll be surprised. There's people who are against this method. So we are now, okay, just to take you through this diagram. So as an author, you will submit your work and it will be received by the editor, and the editor can either reject, desk rejection, remember, or the editor might, find your work interesting and pass it on to the review panel. And the review panel, there's 4 possibilities here. They can also reject your work, or they can have a look at it and ask you to do some revisions, which will go back to the editor once you've agreed to do the revisions. Or the reviewers can take it back to the editor, and it can be a cycle. And these are some of the things that determine the timeline of the publishing process from submission to publication. And yeah, from there your work will get accepted. It'll be formatted by the journal for it to abide by the guidelines, formatting guidelines of that journal, and yay, your work is published. Now we're gonna talk about the editor. We're gonna look deep into the editor. So journal editors evaluate all manuscripts that are submitted to the journal, right? So they select those that they consider to be suitable for the journal to send to peer review, like I said. So they then consider peer review's advice. So that's why you have this cycle over here. They consider peer review's advice to decide on what gets published. And editors are very busy people in the review process, and they usually must decide on the suitability of a paper before they even send it to the review panel. So they look at a variety of things, and aim and scope of your research is usually the first thing that they look at, because it does not because if it doesn't fit their journal, then that's where you get a desk rejection. They also look at the type of your manuscript. Certain journals prefer certain types of manuscript. You have your review, opinion pieces, or original research. So it's important to check with that journal what type of manuscripts do they take, because you might be wanting to submit original research only to find that they only deal with reviews and short communications. So those are the things you need to take into account. Also, the quality of language is also checked, and there is no getting around the fact that English is the language of science, and certain standards need to be met, therefore. But a good journal should offer help. It should offer to help you if your language is an issue. And this is the case in most cases. English is not our native language, and if my work is going to be rejected because of language, it's totally unfair. But there are good journals out there that will offer to help you if language is an issue, but they see potential in your work. They'll assess the quality of your work by scanning whether you use the right methodology. Is it current in that field? Are you aware of new research in your field? They also look at novelty, which can be quite subjective, because one person might find your work a novel, whereas the next person might find it, not to be so novel. That's why I'm saying novelty can be quite subjective, but there are journals that look at novelty, and editors as well. They might also say how personally interesting they find your work, the editor, and that might also influence whether or not they pass it on to the review panel. And if you get all of that right, you won't get a desk rejection. The editor will send your manuscript to the review panel. Now, selection of reviewers. So the editor is the one who selects reviewers in this case, and it's usually 2 reviewers. So you have reviewer 1 and reviewer 2, the brutal, always critical reviewer 2. And the editor selects these 2 reviewers based on personal knowledge sometimes, or their personal networks sometimes, and also based on papers related to your work, what you reference or cite in your manuscript. That's how the editor will select who will review your work. And most editors also use reviewer databases that exist in that journal to select possible reviewers for your work. And yeah, that's how the review process works. And we have the peer review. So we have different types of peer review. So it is therefore important for the author to check with the journal in order to be aware of their respective rules in this regard. Each type comes with its own advantages and disadvantages, right? In the single blind review, which is the most traditional, the mostly used type of review. So in this type of review, the reviewers are hidden from the author. You don't know who's reviewing your work. And this is advantageous because reviewer anonymity allows for impartial decisions where reviewers aren't influenced by the authors. However, authors may be concerned that reviewers in their field could delay publication, giving reviewers a chance to publish first. Yeah, it happens. Another disadvantage is that reviewers may use their own anonymity as justification for being unnecessarily critical, for being harsh when commenting on your work. And in the double-blind review model, so both reviewer and author are anonymous, which limits reviewer bias, for example, based on the author's gender, country of origin, academic status, or previous publication history. So it is advantageous in that. This model is also advantageous because articles written by, let's say, a prestigious, renowned author are considered based on the content rather than on the reputation of that author, of that person who submitted that work. However, keep in mind that reviewers can often identify the author through their writing style, subject matter, or even self-citation, thus making total anonymity difficult to achieve most of the time. You also have the triple blind review type. So in the triple blind review type, you have reviewers are anonymous and author's identity is unknown to both the reviewer and the editor. And articles are anonymized at the submission stage. I find this interesting. I've never done it. And yeah, I imagine myself submitting my work without my name on the manuscript, or I wonder how it really works, or if there's anyone who has ever used it. But yes, you submit your work without disclosing your name, and your manuscript is handled in such a way to minimize any potential bias towards the author. However, the anonymizing process remains highly complex. And similar to the double-blind model, reviewers can still identify the author, which does not do any good to the whole point of wanting to be anonymous. And then we have the open review type of review. So in open review, this is an umbrella term for many different models aiming at greater transparency during and after the review process, where the reviewer and the author know each other. However, the reviewer may shy away from being critical in fear of retaliation should table tens and the author becomes the reviewer for the previous reviewer. It happens. Other type of open review comes with publication of reviewers' names on the article page and peer review report alongside the article. I like this, and I read a few articles where the article comes with reviewer comments, and I find this useful because it gives you a deeper insight into the findings of the article, because you get to see what the reviewers asked the author and how did the author answer that particular issue. I find this very useful and I wish it could be common. Another way is a discussion forum for the scientific community in that specific field to comment on the work, either openly or anonymously. So there are different types of reviewing, and yeah, single blind is the most commonly used type of review. So we're going to talk about rejection now. So at the end of the first review or the first peer review process, your paper might get accepted as it is, right? But that is very rare. Don't get me wrong. As the author, I would also love for my paper to be accepted, you know, as it is. But that is very rare to have your paper being accepted as it is. And if it doesn't, if it gets rejected, you do not despair. You try. It's frustrating, I know, but don't despair. Just trust the process, because your manuscript is getting more and more enhanced through a review process, because they won't just reject your work. They'll give you pointers as to why they have rejected your work, and through those comments, before you think about submitting your work to another journal, you might want to consider or look at their, feedback. What is it? Why was my work rejected? How can I improve it? So you trust in the process, and actually, I believe there's always a way to improve a paper, and the peer review is a very important process in the life of a manuscript that needs to get published. Look at it as a constructive process to enhance your work rather than something that's trying to break your spirit. It does break your spirit, but you stay away from that rejected manuscript for a few days, and then you come back to it and read the comments, and then you work on it. You think about another journal to submit it to. There are different reasons why your paper might get rejected, either early on from the editor's desk, which is something you might want to avoid at all costs, or right at the end of your...
Dr. Molale, sorry. In fact, Dr. Banda has asked this question in particular in the chat. And the question, beg your pardon? How does it normally happen that a manuscript is rejected at the level of the editor, even before it goes for peer review? So maybe I thought, because you are touching the subject, this is from Dr. Banda. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a valid question, because it's not fair for for my work to be rejected based on just one person. How is it that the editor is the one who rejects my work? But like I said, what the editor does, number one, they look at, is your work, compliant with the aim and scope of that particular journal? So if it's something completely different that they don't publish in this journal, they'll just reject it right away. But there's other reasons, like I touched on in the previous slides. But then again, yeah, I guess that's why some people don't believe in the review process, because it has its own fair share of unfairness. Yeah, and I don't know if there's any comment from the audience as to why should the editor be the rejecter. I welcome those inputs.
Dr. Tolu, you responded to Chichi. Do you want to corroborate your sentiments and to also maybe give an input? Why should the editors have that right, maybe? Just as asked by Dr. Molale. Do you want to say something there?
Okay, thanks. Well, just as I indicated in the chat box, there are a number of reasons why manuscripts would receive desk rejection. First is if it's not within the scope, the aim and scope of the journal, that's one. Then two, if it has a regional focus. I have got this kind of comments before, feedback from many journals, and they say that we're sorry, it doesn't align with the international outlook of a piece. Maybe you could send it to a journal which has a regional focus. So again, then also too, some journals, particularly the high impact factors, high impact ones, are always looking out for groundbreaking research. So they often, sometimes they do tell you that, well, thank you for submitting, but we see that your work is too, well, I'm speaking from my own experience, it's too simplistic. We're looking for something that has more rigor, something more challenging, new and refreshing. So, and then also to plagiarism. That's another, if you find out that the similarity index exceeds the threshold set by the journal, it would receive a rejection. So these are I'm sure there are others, but.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, Dr. Tolu. I see we have another hand. Right?
Yes, Chichi.
That's quite interesting, because recently I had submitted a manuscript to one of the journals, international, and I had to be sent back because of the page number. They actually have a page number limit that they have already set as their criteria. So I guess I had to go back to the drawing board with the page numbers.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, some journals can be that strict. Hey. Okay, yeah, and it could also be because the message is unclear in your manuscript. and your work will just be rejected. Another reason for rejection could be that you overstated your conclusions, where the amount of evidence you provided does not match up with what you are saying in the conclusions. And that happens, especially, as an early researcher or as a student. It's possible to overestimate your conclusions, and those could be some of the things that lead to a rejection. I see your hand is up, Dr. Molale.
Yes, there is a question from Pino. He says, there are journals that publish mainly work attempting to contribute to decolonization of knowledge production. I'm not sure if you are familiar with this, Dr. Miela, or anyone who may make an input, maybe critical, reflective type of journals.
Yeah, I think I'll bounce the question to everyone in the chat.
So the question is, are there journals that focus on publishing work that contributes towards the decolonization of knowledge production? I think that's what Pino is asking, but if some of us may not know, it is fine, Pino. I can have this discussion with you privately if you don't mind.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
All right, Pino, I will have a conversation with you privately. I can locate you to some journals that I have come across that are critical reflective in terms of, contributions in the global north, contribution in the global south. Yeah, so we will talk. Thank you. You may proceed, Dr. Moyala.
Okay, thank you. Another reason for rejection could be that the editor or the reviewers are just not interested in your work, which is another unfairness there, because 3 people are not interested in my work and it gets rejected. So there can be issues of subjectivity. Ethics is also a very important factor, especially if the study involves human subjects. So a paper might be rejected based on a lack of ethical clearance certificate or flawed methodologies that do not abide by the ethics code for that particular subject. But for our students here who've been attending this series of presentations, I don't think you will have your paper rejected because of these factors, because we've had great presentations on ethics, we've had great presentations on scientific methods. So yeah. Also, if your paper is a mess, so to speak, in terms of presentation, where, for example, the format falls outside of the journal's required format, that could be another, like the previous member of the panel has just said that their paper was too long, page numbers, and they had to review that to revise that. So yeah, some journals can be that strict. Revisions. So on the contrary, your manuscript may get accepted, this is what we all want. This is what should happen. We all want our manuscript to be accepted. So your manuscript gets accepted, but it can get accepted on conditions that you do some revisions to your work, right, as highlighted here. And if this is the case, so required revisions from both the editor and the reviewer may either be minor, which happens often, or they could be major, where you are sent back to the lab. If you are in my field of research where we do most of our work in the lab, or you might be sent back to the field to redo some experiments. You may be asked to add more methodologies, which this is very common in my field. And it's important to consider all comments, right, from both the editor and the reviewers. But remember, you are not obliged to follow all of them. Just because the editor or the reviewer think you should do this doesn't mean that you have to. So you can argue against it if you have, sufficient justification. You don't always have to do what the reviewers or the editor say you must do in a revision request. It's important to highlight your changes in the manuscript when you do those revisions to make it easier for the editor to accept your changes. Otherwise, they might have to send your paper back to the reviewers, and this is one of the reasons why it takes time for your paper to finally get published because of these back and forths between you and the reviewers and the editor. And the most important thing you need to take out of this process is that the reviewers and the editor are usually trying to help you. They're trying to be constructive. So you shouldn't take their comments to heart. It's not personal attack. And always remember that peer review is not always perfect. There's always human error. So if you get that rejection or those nasty or very demanding revisions, stay away from that for a few days and then come back without emotions and just work on it. And yeah, because that's the one way to enhance your work. That's the one way for you to publish something that is of good quality. So yes, emotions aside. So you do your revisions and you send back to the editor, and hopefully the editor will accept your manuscript. Remember, the review process can happen again. So from the revisions, you submit them back to the editor. The review process can take place again, and they can require more revisions. And these are some of the things that will, determine the length of the time your manuscript will be accepted for publication. But yeah, you did a good job, and now your manuscript has been accepted. Congratulations. And this will be followed by the journal producing your article so that it falls within their requirements in terms of how it looks, formatting and all that. And yeah, your work gets published. Usually it gets published online first, and sometimes it gets printed. I don't know if that still happens a lot lately, where you get a printed journal. I don't know, I've never seen a printed journal. It's always online. But yeah, some do print. And job well done, right? Except that people may not be reading your work, and you need to start doing the job of trying to promote your published work. So for people to see and read your work, you need to promote it, which will ultimately have your work gain more citations, as this will be important during your early career development. Because in addition to being of great quality, your research, whether you like it or not, will be judged on whether or not it has any impact in that specific field. And I know this in my field, this is how it works. Does your research have any impact? And this is often determined through citations. Is your work being referenced, and how much? So this will determine whether or not you get that promotion. So to promote your, and this speaks a lot to those students who wish to follow the academic route. Otherwise, there's no need for you to worry about having many citations as long as you're a published researcher. But yeah, different strokes for different folks. So to improve your published article, you need to do the following to promote it, so to speak. You need to make it easy to find, and you need to do this by increasing the discoverability of your paper with what is called search engine optimization. I will expand on this in the following slides, but that's number one, make it easy to find. Share wherever you can, social media, institutional or research group profile. I know with other research groups, they actually have a website where the PI would list all the students and postdocs, and you will have your own profile there. And that's where you need to talk about the work that you do. You need to list the publications that you have. And you also need to increase your online visibility as a researcher, right? And so here you register for an ORCID ID to get a unique and a persistent identifier, and this will distinguish you from every other researcher, and it will connect you to your research activities as well, so you always get the credit for your work. Also talk about your research. Unfortunately, during the COVID times, we don't have that freedom of being in conferences where you can just freely network with people and find yourself speaking about your work, but take advantage of the virtual conferences, webinars, departmental seminars, journal clubs. If you do such, we do a lot of these. And this is where you can speak about your research. Right. Now, before I tell you how you can practice the rules of search engine optimization, I want you to read this title here and tell me if you can just scan through the abstract. It will be good if you can read it, but just scan through it to see if the keywords provided, these keywords, to see if these keywords do appear in the abstract and in the title. That should take you about 2 minutes. And yeah, just raise your hands, and by show of hands, just I want to see how many of you think that this article will be easily discoverable by a simple Google search or your Scopus search or your Web of Science, based on the usage of keywords. So if I see a raised hand, I will know that you agree that this abstract will be easily, searchable. And if I don't see any hands, I'll take it that you don't approve of this article being easily found online. I see one hand. Dr. Molale, can you see any more hands?
I can't see any other hands. Okay, Pino, there's another hand, yes.
Okay. Don't be shy. I know it's Friday evening, it's freezing, it's 14 degrees in Pretoria. So we just want to snuggle and watch TV and eat supper, but yeah, I'm almost at the end. Okay, so some of you do think that it is searchable, and I agree. Because if you look at the highlighted keywords, for example, political, it is highlighted, almost 3 times in the abstract. And this makes it, an easily searchable abstract. So in most cases, people will not read your article directly from a journal, right? But rather they will use different search engines, the main one being Google, to find your paper. So it's very important that you write your article title and abstract in such a way that it is easier to find in your field through the internet. And the process of search engine optimization, according to Wiley publishers, in order to make your article easy to find online, involves 3 steps. So number 1, you need to create a title that is search engine friendly by keeping it short and including 1 to 2 keywords that are related to your topic in that title. The second step urges you to optimize the abstract by repeating 1 or 2 keywords 3 to 6 times within the abstract, because the main purpose of the abstract is to express the key points of your research clearly and concisely. Therefore, I agree that this is a searchable abstract, because we see that the keyword political appears 3 times in the abstract, and it's also in the title. So these are the things that you need to keep in mind when you are drafting that abstract, when you are working on that title, and you are ready to submit your article for publishing. And to close this presentation, these are the tools that you can use, or different ways that you can use to, maximize the impact of your published research. Because if it is just out there online, but no one is aware of it, it also doesn't, have much impact. So as much as you are a published researcher, you also want your research to have impact. And for it to have impact, it has to reach people, it has to be visible. And these are the ways you can make it visible. For example, the search engine optimization that I just spoken about, conferences, even publicity. If your research is newsworthy, you can, be invited to a TV interview or a radio interview, also networking, like I've mentioned, the wider web, having your ResearchGate, your ORCID, your Google Scholar profiles up and updated. And yeah, even your email. So you can even leave a link to your published work in your email signature. Yeah. And social media. You can talk about your research on social media. You can share your published research on media, on social media. And yeah, these are the ways that you can use to make your published research have an impact, because through these, your work will be read, your work will be cited, and your work will say that it has impact in that specific field. And yeah, I'll leave it here for today. Thank you for your time. And I'm sorry, I'm a little bit over time, but thank you, Chair.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Miela. Your parting words. Well, this was an insightful presentation. We've learned so much. Nice tips on how to get published and how to follow the publication process. There's a comment that I had made earlier in the chat. Perhaps maybe you might want to comment on this. My question was, well, I was stating a conundrum to say, speaking about publishing and the claims, knowledge claims that we get to make in our writing, mostly right in the English world. How sure are we that our work has not been done or conducted before in the Francophone world, or in Portuguese, or in Mandarin, or in Scandinavian countries where they do not speak English? How can one be confident that these findings that you are claiming to have made in your study, they haven't been found in other regions? This is perhaps a difficult question to answer.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer. But obviously, as you're doing your literature review, you'll get to see who exactly is doing similar work that you are doing. For example, in my case, I'm working on cervical cancer biomarkers, and I know exactly who's working on these particular biomarkers across the world through the internet, you know. I'm aware that there's a lot of work similar to mine that's been done in China. And one unfortunate thing that happened recently is that these Chinese guys did exactly what I was planning to do, and they published it, in Nature. And I was like, wow. So yeah, I think one way to be aware is to just be on the lookout in your field. Who does similar work as myself? What's out there currently?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sincere response. Thank you. Dr. Mmutle, you have a question. Perhaps you might want to contextualize the question. You were speaking about blind peer review. While he is looking for that question, colleagues, thank you so much for the interaction. We've had a lot of people making input here. Yes, Dr. Mmutle, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Molale, and once more, thank you, Dr. Moyela, for this insightful and timely presentation, particularly as I know that we have a number of students who recently graduated and might be looking along the ranges of publishing their work, and other colleagues who are also, or rather continuously, busy with the process of producing new knowledge. And I think therefore your presentation couldn't have came at a better time, simply because of we have gained a lot on some of the hacks to go about, as in when you are preparing your manuscripts for publication, what to look for, and how therefore to identify these high impact factor journals. Most importantly, what I wanted to or rather the question that I had, Dr. Moyela, was simply to say, in terms of your blind or peer review process, what happens when the reviewer continuously directs you to consult certain sources or claims that you have overlooked what they perceive as seminal work? and you cannot therefore draw a correlation between what they view as seminal work with your own scope. Remember, therefore, that this individual in this case stands on the way of your work to be published. These are the gatekeepers we normally refer to them as. What are your thoughts or experiences in this regard? Thank you, Dr. Mmutle.
Thank you, Dr. Mmutle. Can you just repeat your question? I'm sorry.
Okay, simply the question was based on the fact that you would notice from time to time there would be, as in when your manuscript, the editor passes it to the reviewers, then you get feedback from the reviewer, and the reviewer would most likely say to you that you have somehow overlooked certain seminal work, groundbreaking work in a particular area or theme. And you realize that when you go and check this work that they are referring or directing you to, there is no direct correlation with your work. And this is an individual that acts as a gatekeeper, meaning that they stand in the way of your work being published. This is to say that if you don't adhere to what they are saying in terms of the review process itself, the likelihood is that your manuscript would not necessarily be published. I simply wanted to get your thoughts on this. What experiences do you have in relation to these gatekeepers? And I know for a fact, perhaps, that some of these gatekeepers might simply want you to cite some of their sources, and let most cite some of the people that they think they are prominent. Hence, they direct you to this particular work that they perceive as seminal. Now, I wanted to get your thoughts on this one. Thank you.
Yeah, you're making a good point there, Dr. Mmutle. And in my case, like I said, you don't always have to abide by the revision requirements from the review panel. You can, if you have sufficient evidence, you can justify why you're not abiding by what they are saying. So the key is to be able to justify your defiance, in a constructive manner. Tell them that, no, I actually think 1, 2, 3 because of 1, 2, 3. This is where I stand. And yeah, I've had a few cases where the reviewers are saying something that I don't believe in, and I respond to that with evidence to say that, no, this work is actually novel. It hasn't been done before. What you're referring to was actually doing something different. So you respond to them, you defy with justification, with reference, with evidence. And it would really be unfair for them to reject even that justification. I don't know. The next step would be to find another journal, but yeah, that would be unfortunate. I don't know if anyone else has had the same experience.
I thank you once more, Dr. Mmutle. I think your answer is spot on. And this is simply to say that you should not necessarily focus on one journal, although when you submit your manuscript, you are required to declare whether your manuscript is under review with another journal. And this is the declaration that the editor is more keen on, to know the originality of your work. Most importantly, I appreciate the answer that you have given. And it's simply, to some extent, what I would refer to the stubbornness of a reviewer. If they cannot accede to your justifications, particularly if your justifications are quite valid and concrete, therefore it means one has to look at other avenues as to ensure that your work is published ultimately. And I like the fact that you have attempted as well in your presentation to have a look in different journals, as in when you were developing this particular presentation and the examples. Therefore, that gives an indication that we should not necessarily be rigid into this particular, although there would be preference to say, when I publish my work in this journal, I know it will be seen, I know there will be a huge impact, and I will get recognition for producing this particular knowledge. That also needs to be taken into cognizance. I earlier wanted to add the fact that what is important in terms of journal safing itself, it is also to consult what we call the author guidelines that these journals would ordinarily have. That also assists in terms of understanding the style and technique that are acceptable in a particular journal, including going through what Tulo also said, and including yourself, Dr. Molale, in your presentation, the aim and scope of a particular journal, so that you know whether your work would, from the onset, fit into that particular journal, or you are simply taking a chance. Sometimes we get rejected simply because of you are attempting to take a chance. And it is always important to ensure that you don't necessarily go for a chance, but you go for a journal that is suitable for your manuscript. And that is what is important in terms of getting published. But most importantly, therefore, I thank you, Dr. Molale, for your presentation. We have enjoyed a lot. I would allow Dr. Molale and colleagues that have anything to add to simply add, so that we may conclude the business of the day. Dr. Molale?
Dr. Mmutle, Dr. Osayomi, Dr. Molale, Pino, Virginia, I want to thank you, Isabel, I want to thank you, all of you, sincerely, for being with us this afternoon. Thank you so much to our presenters for having enriched us in this way. Pino, may I direct you to the chat, where you will find a response by Dr. Mmutle on books and journals that may publish or have special issues on decolonization of knowledge production, as per your question. And if you still like more clarity, we can direct you, so you can contact us privately. Colleagues, we have come to the end of our presentation today. Thank you so very much. We've been streaming live on YouTube. Let us meet again on Monday, on the 7th of June. That will be our last leg of the seminar presentations. And then we'll be meeting again on the 18th for that guest lecture presented by Isabel. Thank you so very much, colleagues, and may you have a lovely evening further. May we just remain with the presenters to debrief. Isabel, you are with us. We'll just debrief quickly, and then we'll be having our discussion. Thank you, colleagues. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Right, I am here with you, just so you know.
All right. Thank you.